My name is Alexander Reed, and 3 weeks ago I destroyed my brother's wedding with a single phone call. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my corner office overlooking downtown Seattle. My assistant buzzed me, "Mr. Reed, there is a wedding planner on line 2. She says it is about your brother Marcus." I picked up the phone expecting to hear about some last-minute detail for the wedding I was supposedly attending in 10 days. "Hello, this is Elena Martinez from Prestige Wedding Planning. I am calling regarding the Reed Williams wedding on the 23rd. "Yes, what can I help you with?" "Well, this is rather awkward, but I have been instructed to inform you that your invitation has been rescinded. However, the family is hoping you will still honor your commitment to cover the deposit and catering costs as previously discussed." I set down my pen and leaned back in my chair. "I am sorry. Could you repeat that?" "Your family has decided that your presence at the wedding would be disruptive, but they still need the $65,000 you promised to contribute." $65,000. For a wedding I was no longer invited to attend. "And who exactly made this decision?" I asked. "Your parents and your brother felt it would be best for everyone involved." "I hope you understand." I understood perfectly. My family wanted my money but not my presence. They wanted me to fund their celebration while being excluded from it. "Elena, I need you to listen very carefully to what I am about to tell you." "Of course, sir." "Cancel the entire wedding." There was a pause. "I am sorry, what did you say?" "Cancel everything. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the music, the hotel blocks. All of it." "Sir, I think there has been a misunderstanding. You are not the groom. You cannot just cancel someone else's wedding." "Actually, Elena, I can, because I own the venue where the reception is being held. I own the catering company providing the food. I own the hotel chain where all the out-of-town guests have reservations. And as of this morning, I own the company that employs you." The silence on the other end of the phone was absolute. "Mr. Reed, are you saying?" "I am saying that my family just uninvited me from a wedding that is taking place entirely on my properties, using my services, planned by my employees. And they want me to pay for the privilege of being excluded." "Oh my God! You have 24 hours to notify all vendors, guests, and venues that the Reed Williams wedding has been canceled. Anyone who has already made travel arrangements will receive full compensation for their expenses. But there will be no wedding on the 23rd. I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair, looking out at the Seattle skyline. In the distance, I could see the building that housed one of my hotels, where my family members were probably checking in right about now, completely unaware that their weekend celebration was about to become a very expensive lesson in respect. But to understand how we got to this point, I need to tell you about the 15 years of building an empire while my family thought I was barely keeping my head above water. My name is Alexander Reed. I am 35 years old, and I am the founder and CEO of Prestige Hospitality Group, a company that owns and operates luxury venues, catering services, and boutique hotels across the Pacific Northwest. My personal net worth is approximately $230 million, spread across real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and business assets that generate more passive income in a month than most people see in a year. My family thinks I am a high school dropout who has been bouncing between dead-end jobs for the past decade and probably lives paycheck to paycheck when the paychecks actually come. The deception was not intentional at first. It started as simple privacy, the natural desire to keep my business success separate from my personal relationships. But over the years, as my wealth grew and my family's condescension remained constant, maintaining the fiction became a form of protection against their judgment and assumptions. And occasionally, it became an opportunity for very expensive revenge. Growing up in Spokane as the oldest of 3 children, I learned early that my parents had very specific definitions of success and failure. Success meant following their prescribed path. Good grades, college degree, corporate job, steady climb up someone else's ladder until you reached middle management and could afford a house in the suburbs with a 2-car garage and annual vacations to places like Disneyland. Failure meant anything that deviated from that plan. My brother Marcus followed the plan perfectly. Honor roll student from elementary school through high school, business degree from Washington State University, entry-level position at a Fortune 500 company, methodical promotions every 18 months to 2 years. By 30, Marcus was the poster child for middle-class achievement, salary with benefits, for 401k contributions, suburban house with the required 2-car garage, engagement to a woman with similar credentials and compatible life goals. My sister Caroline took a slight variation of the same path. College degree in education, teaching position at a well-regarded elementary school, marriage to another teacher she met during student teaching, comfortable life in a planned community outside Spokane, where they could afford a nice house and save money for their children's college educations. Respectable, stable, predictable. Then there was me. Alexander, you need to think seriously about your future, my father said during what would become the first of many intervention dinners. I was 17, working as an assistant manager at a local restaurant called Murphy's Irish Pub, and earning more money than most of my teachers while learning more about business operations than any of my classmates were learning in their advanced placement classes. I am thinking about it, Dad. I want to own restaurants someday. Maybe a whole chain of them. My mother looked at me like I had announced plans to join the circus or become a professional gambler. Honey, restaurant work is not a career. It is something you do while you figure out what you actually want to do with your life. What if this is what I want to do with my life? Marcus, who was 15 at the time but already designated as the family voice of reason and practical wisdom, shook his head with the confidence of someone who had never worked a day in his life, but had read plenty of articles about economic trends and career planning. Alex, you cannot build wealth working in restaurants. The failure rate is enormous, the profit margins are tiny, and you will never have the kind of financial security that comes with a real career. You need a real education if you want to be successful. I am learning more about business running this restaurant than I would learn in 4 years of college classes, I argued. I understand profit and loss, inventory management, customer service, employee scheduling, vendor negotiations. How is that not a real education? You are learning how to flip burgers and pour drinks, Caroline added with the casual dismissiveness that would characterize her attitude toward my choices for the next 2 decades. That is not the same thing as understanding economics or finance or marketing strategy. The conversation was my first real lesson in how my family saw the world. To them, legitimate success only came through traditional channels, college degrees that cost tens of thousands of dollars, corporate jobs that required you to spend 40 years climbing someone else's ladder, steady paychecks that came with the security of knowing exactly how much money you would make for the rest of your life. Entrepreneurship was either a fantasy entertained by people who watched too many movies about overnight success, or a last resort for people who could not make it in the real world of corporate employment. I graduated high school with a 2.8 GPA and immediately started working full-time at Murphy's Irish Pub. Within 6 months, I was managing the entire operation during evening shifts. Within a year, I had increased profits by 20% through better inventory management and improved customer service training. Within 18 months, I had convinced the owner, an aging Irishman named Patrick Murphy who wanted to spend more time with his grandchildren, to let me open a second location with myself as the general manager. Within 2 years, I owned both restaurants outright. My family's reaction was predictable and disappointing. "This is great experience, son," my father said when I told him about the purchase during a family dinner that I had prepared myself using recipes I had perfected in my own kitchens. "Now you can put business ownership on your resume when you apply for management positions with real companies." Why would I want to work for someone else when I own two profitable businesses that are growing every month? Because restaurants fail, Alexander. 90% of them close within 5 years. The ones that survive usually break even at best. You need to think about long-term stability instead of short-term profits. Dad, I am not just surviving. I am thriving. Last month, I cleared more profit than you make in 6 months at the insurance company. My father worked as a claims adjuster for a regional insurance company, a job that provided steady income and excellent benefits, but would never make him wealthy or give him the kind of financial freedom that comes with business ownership. Profit is not the same as salary, Alexander. Profit can disappear overnight if the economy changes or if customers stop coming. A salary is guaranteed income that you can count on for planning your future. That conversation defined the fundamental difference between my family's mindset and mine, and it would influence every interaction we had for the next decade. They saw small business ownership as inherently risky and unstable, something you did until you could get a real job with a large corporation that offered security and predictability. I saw it as the foundation for building wealth and creating the kind of life where you control your own destiny instead of depending on someone else's decisions about your worth and your future. Over the next 5 years, I proved my family wrong in ways they could not ignore, though they continued to find reasons to dismiss my success as temporary or unsustainable. I expanded from 2 restaurants to 6, each one more profitable than the last, each one teaching me new lessons about operations, marketing, finance, and leadership. When I was 24, I sold all 6 restaurants for a combined total of $2.8 million and reinvested the entire amount in a catering company that specialized in corporate events and high-end private parties. My family assumed I had sold the restaurants because they were failing, and they saw the catering business as evidence that I was starting over again from scratch, still unable to find something stable that would provide long-term security. At least catering is more upscale than running pubs, my mother said when I explained the transition during one of our monthly family dinners. Maybe this will lead to something more professional, as if serving food to corporate executives and wealthy families was somehow more legitimate than serving food to working-class customers who appreciated good value and friendly service. The catering company grew rapidly, serving events throughout Eastern Washington and generating profits that exceeded anything I had achieved with the restaurants. Within 3 years, I was clearing over $400,000 annually in profit, more money than my parents had ever imagined was possible for someone without a college degree. But because I continued to live modestly, still driving my reliable but unimpressive Toyota Camry, still living in a decent but not extravagant apartment, still dressing casually when I was not working, my family assumed that the catering business was just another small operation that provided a comfortable but not remarkable living. When I sold the catering company for $12 million at age 27 and used the money to start acquiring event venues, hotels, and other hospitality properties, my family interpreted it as evidence that I was still bouncing between different businesses, still unable to find something stable that could provide long-term career satisfaction. I just worry about you never settling down in one field, my mother said during a conversation about my latest career change. Marcus has been with the same company for 8 years now, and he is really building something there. Caroline has tenure at her school, so she knows she will always have job security. But you keep starting over every few years. Starting over. In my mother's mind, selling a business for $12 million and reinvesting the profits in larger, more sophisticated operations was equivalent to starting over because it did not fit her definition of career progression. The misunderstanding was partially my fault. Every time my income jumped significantly, I maintained the same modest lifestyle that had characterized my early 20s. Part of this was practical. I was reinvesting every dollar I made into acquiring new properties and expanding my business empire, focusing on long-term wealth building rather than short-term lifestyle inflation. But part of it was also psychological. My family had spent years predicting my failure, warning me about the risks of entrepreneurship, suggesting that I should abandon my dreams and follow their prescribed path to respectability. I found a perverse satisfaction in letting them continue believing I was struggling while I built something that would eventually prove them completely wrong about everything they thought they knew about success and security. By the time I was 30, I owned 6 event venues ranging from intimate wine bars to grand ballrooms that could accommodate 500 guests. I owned 3 catering companies that served different market segments from casual corporate lunches to elaborate wedding receptions. I owned 2 boutique hotels in Seattle and Portland that catered to business travelers and tourists who valued personalized service and attention to detail. My businesses employed over 400 people and generated annual revenues exceeding $50 million. I had a diversified investment portfolio that included real estate, stocks, bonds, and private equity funds. I owned residential properties in 4 states that provided rental income, and I had enough cash flow to retire comfortably at 30 if I wanted to pursue other interests. My family thought I was a restaurant manager who had gotten lucky a few times but was still basically living paycheck to paycheck, probably struggling to save money for retirement or emergencies. The deception might have continued indefinitely if my brother had not decided to get married. Marcus announced his engagement to Patricia Williams at Christmas dinner 2 years ago, presenting it as the culmination of a carefully planned courtship that had met all the criteria my parents had established for successful relationships. Patricia came from the kind of family my parents had always hoped their children would marry into: well-educated, financially comfortable, socially connected, committed to the same middle-class values that defined my parents' worldview. Her father was a surgeon who specialized in cardiac procedures and made the kind of money that allowed for European vacations and private school educations. Her mother was a lawyer who had built a successful practice in estate planning and spent her free time on charitable boards that organized fundraising events for local hospitals and museums. Their wedding was going to be a showcase of everything my family aspired to achieve: elegant, expensive, attended by the kind of people who represented success in their minds. "We are thinking about having the reception at the Fairmont," Patricia said as she showed off her engagement ring, a 2-carat diamond that had cost Marcus 3 months' salary and represented the kind of financial commitment that my parents saw as evidence of serious intentions and mature decision-making. "How expensive is that?" my mother asked, trying to sound casual but clearly concerned about the financial implications of a wedding at one of Seattle's most prestigious hotels. "About $40,000 for the venue rental, plus catering, flowers, music, photography. We are looking at close to $100,000 total for everything we want." The number hung in the air like a challenge. $100,000 was more than my parents made in a year combined, more than they had ever spent on any single purchase except their house. It was more than Marcus and Patricia could afford without help, and it was exactly the kind of expense that would force my family to make difficult decisions about priorities and sacrifices. "Well," my father said carefully, clearly trying to process the financial implications, "we will help as much as we can, but that is a lot of money for one day." "We understand," Marcus said quickly, not wanting to appear presumptuous about family financial support. "We are applying for a personal loan to cover most of it. We just need some help with the deposit and maybe part of the catering costs." "How much help are we talking about?" Caroline asked, probably calculating how much money she and her husband could contribute without affecting their own financial goals. "Maybe $20,000 or $30,000 from the family," Patricia said. "We know it is a lot to ask, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and we want it to be perfect." Over the next several months, the wedding planning became a source of constant stress and frequent conversations for my parents. They wanted to contribute meaningfully to their son's most important day, but the costs were astronomical by their standards. Every family gathering included discussions about wedding expenses, vendor selections, and ways to manage the budget without compromising Patricia's vision for their celebration. My parents took out a second mortgage on their house to help cover wedding expenses. They depleted the vacation fund they had been building for their 30th anniversary trip to Ireland. They postponed replacing their aging Honda Accord and asked Caroline to contribute money she had been saving for her own children's education. The financial pressure was enormous, and it was affecting every aspect of their daily lives. They stopped eating out at restaurants, canceled their cable television subscription, and started shopping at discount grocery stores instead of the supermarket they had patronized for 20 years. And eventually, inevitably, they asked me to help. "Alexander, we need to talk to you about Marcus's wedding," my mother said during a phone call in March, her voice carrying the kind of tension that suggested she had been rehearsing this conversation for weeks. "We are trying to cover all the expenses, but it is really stretching our budget in ways we did not anticipate." "How much are we talking about?" I asked, genuinely curious about what they thought I could afford to contribute. "Well, the venue deposit alone is $20,000, and the catering is another $45,000. If you could help with maybe $15,000 or $20,000, it would make a huge difference for the whole family." $20,000. My daily investment income was more than $20,000. I could have written a check for the entire wedding without affecting my lifestyle in any measurable way, without delaying any of my business plans, without even thinking about the expense. But I was curious about something. "Mom, that is a lot of money. Are you sure this is the right way to spend it? Maybe Marcus and Patricia should consider a smaller wedding that fits within their actual budget." "Alexander, this is your brother's wedding. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event that will be remembered by everyone who attends. We want it to be perfect, and we want Patricia to have the wedding of her dreams. But if it is putting the family in financial stress, maybe the dreams need to be adjusted to match reality. We will figure it out. Family takes care of family. That is what we do. Family takes care of family." The same parents who had told me for 15 years that I needed to stand on my own 2 feet and learn to handle my own problems were now asking me to contribute to a wedding that would put them in debt for years. "Let me think about it," I said. "I need to look at my own finances and see what I can afford." Over the next few weeks, I had similar conversations with Marcus and Caroline. Everyone was contributing whatever they could afford, making sacrifices to ensure that the wedding would meet Patricia's expectations and reflect well on the family's commitment to supporting important milestones. The assumption was that $20,000 would be a significant sacrifice for me, requiring careful budgeting and probably some borrowing, but something I should be willing to do for family. I decided to test something. I could probably help with more than $20,000. I told Marcus during a conversation about the wedding plans. "Business has been good lately, and I have been saving money. I might be able to cover the entire venue deposit and catering costs." "Alex, that would be incredible. Are you sure you can afford it?" "I think so. Let me talk to my accountant and see what I can do without putting myself in a bad financial position." The reaction from my family was immediate and overwhelming. Suddenly, I was no longer the irresponsible older brother who could not keep a steady job or plan for his financial future. I was the generous family member who was making everyone's dreams possible, the unexpected hero who was willing to sacrifice his own financial security to support his brother's happiness. The wedding planning conversations began including me as a major stakeholder rather than as an afterthought. My opinions about vendors and venue details suddenly mattered. My preferences about menu selections and entertainment options were solicited and respected. For 6 months, I played the role of the struggling but generous brother who was stretching his finances to help family. I attended planning meetings, offered opinions about floral arrangements and photography packages, and allowed my parents to treat me like I was making the biggest financial sacrifice of my life to contribute $65,000 to Marcus's wedding. What they did not know was that I actually owned most of the vendors they were hiring. The venue they chose, Cascade Manor, was a historic property I had purchased 3 years earlier as part of my expansion into the luxury event market. The elegant ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington was one of the most sought-after wedding venues in the Seattle area, commanding premium prices and booking solid for 18 months in advance. The catering company they selected, Pinnacle Catering, was one of my subsidiaries, known for exceptional food quality and impeccable service that justified their reputation as one of the most expensive catering services in the Pacific Northwest. The hotel where out-of-town guests would be staying, the Prestige Seattle, was the flagship property of my hotel chain, a boutique establishment that offered personalized service and luxury amenities to business travelers and tourists who valued quality over price. The wedding planning service coordinating all the details, Elite Events Management, was a company I had acquired 6 months earlier as part of my strategy to control every aspect of the luxury event experience. Even the floral arrangements were being provided by Garden of Eden, a high-end florist that operated out of space I owned in downtown Seattle's Pike Place Market. My family was unknowingly planning their most important celebration using my businesses, funded by my money, while continuing to treat me like someone who barely had 2 nickels to rub together and was probably making a foolish financial decision by contributing more than he could afford. The irony was delicious, but it was about to become even more interesting. 3 months before the wedding, something shifted in my family's attitude toward me. I first noticed it during a family barbecue at my parents' house in July, when the wedding had become the primary topic of conversation for every gathering. Alexander has been so generous with the wedding expenses. My mother was telling Patricia's parents, who had driven over from Bellevue to meet the extended family and discuss final preparations. We really could not have done this without his help. That is wonderful, Patricia's father replied, a distinguished man in his late 50s who wore the kind of casual clothes that cost more than most people's monthly car payments. It must be nice to have family who can step up when needed. The conversation continued, but I noticed something in the way my mother talked about my contribution. There was a subtle implication that I was helping beyond my means, that my generosity was admirable but also potentially foolish, the kind of decision that someone with limited financial understanding might make out of family loyalty. Later that evening, Marcus pulled me aside for a private conversation on the back patio, while the rest of the family was inside cleaning up after dinner. Alex, I want you to know how much Patricia and I appreciate what you are doing for us. But I also want to make sure you are not putting yourself in a bad financial position. $65,000 is a lot of money for someone in your situation. My situation? Working in restaurants and catering, not having a steady salary or benefits. I just want to make sure you are not borrowing money or using credit cards or doing anything risky to help us out. It was the first time anyone had directly addressed what they assumed about my financial situation, and I realized that my family's gratitude was mixed with pity. They thought I was sacrificing my own financial security to help them, and while they appreciated the gesture, they also saw it as evidence of poor judgment and lack of practical financial planning. I can afford it, Marcus. You do not need to worry about my finances. I know, but still, maybe you should hold back some of the money and contribute less. We can figure out other ways to cover the costs. The conversation was surreal. My brother was encouraging me to contribute less money to his wedding because he was worried about my ability to afford my own generosity. He had no idea that his entire wedding budget was less than what I made in a single week, that I could have paid for 10 weddings of the same scale without affecting my standard of living. August brought more of the same energy. Family conversations about the wedding increasingly included subtle suggestions that I should reconsider my contribution, that $65,000 was more than someone in my position should be spending on someone else's celebration. Alexander, we love that you want to help, Caroline said during a family dinner where the main course was dominated by discussion of wedding seating charts and final headcounts. But you have to think about your own future. What if you need that money for an emergency? What if you want to buy a house or start a family someday? What if the restaurant business slows down? My father added. You might need that money to cover your own expenses if you go through a rough patch. They were trying to protect me from my own generosity, convinced that I was making a financially irresponsible decision out of family loyalty and emotional investment in my brother's happiness. Their concern would have been touching if it had not been based on such a fundamental misunderstanding of my actual financial situation. September was when things took a darker turn. I started noticing that family conversations about the wedding were happening without me. Planning meetings were scheduled when I was supposedly working and could not attend. Decisions were made and then announced to me after the fact, presented as conclusions that had been reached after careful consideration of all the relevant factors. When I asked about being included in vendor meetings or venue walkthroughs, I was told that everything was under control and my input was not needed for the remaining details. "We do not want to waste your time with small details," my mother explained when I asked why I had not been invited to a final tasting at the catering company I actually owned. "You are busy with work, and we can handle the planning from here." But I suspected there was more to it than concern for my schedule. The truth came out during a phone call I was not supposed to hear. I had arrived at my parents' house for dinner on a Sunday evening and let myself in through the back door, as I had been doing since I was a child. My parents were in the living room having what sounded like an intense conversation, and I heard my name being mentioned repeatedly. "I am just saying we need to be realistic about Alexander," my father was saying in the tone he used when he was trying to convince my mother of something she did not want to accept. $65,000 is more than he makes in a year. He is going to expect special treatment because of how much he is contributing. "What kind of special treatment?" my mother asked. "He is going to want to bring a guest, even though we told everyone it was family only. He is going to want to be included in all the family photos and the receiving line. He is going to want to give a speech at the reception about how much the family means to him. You know how he gets when he thinks he is important. Maybe we should just tell him we can handle the costs ourselves," my mother suggested. "I do not like feeling obligated to someone who is just going to make demands later. It is too late for that. We already accepted his money, and all the contracts are signed. But we need to make sure he understands that this is Marcus's day, not his. Just because he is paying for part of it does not mean he gets to be the center of attention." I stood in the kitchen listening to my parents discuss me like I was a problem to be managed rather than a family member who was trying to help. They were not grateful for my contribution. They were resentful of it. They saw my generosity as an attempt to buy influence or importance rather than as genuine desire to support my brother's happiness. More importantly, they were already planning ways to minimize my role in the wedding despite accepting my money. October brought the conversation I had been expecting but hoping would not happen. "Alexander, we need to talk about the wedding," Marcus said when he called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice carrying the kind of careful neutrality that suggested he had rehearsed this conversation multiple times. "What about it?" "There have been some complications with the guest list. Patricia's family is larger than we originally thought, and we are running up against capacity limits at the venue. We are going to have to make some difficult decisions about who to invite." "Okay, how does that affect me?" "We are trying to keep the wedding to immediate family only. Parents, siblings, grandparents. We are not going to be able to include plus ones for anyone." This was the first I had heard about a plus one restriction, and I suspected it was being invented specifically to limit my participation in the celebration. "Marcus, are you saying I cannot bring a date to your wedding?" "I am saying nobody can bring dates. We just do not have the space for additional guests." "What about Patricia's brother? Is he allowed to bring his wife?" "That is different. They are married." "What about Caroline? Can she bring her husband?" "Of course. They are family. So I am the only person who cannot bring a guest?" "Alex, you are not even dating anyone seriously. Why do you need a plus one?" The question revealed something important about how my family saw my personal life. Because I had never introduced them to anyone I was seeing, because I kept my romantic relationships separate from family gatherings, they assumed I was not seeing anyone at all. Because I maintained privacy about my dating life, they thought I had no dating life worth acknowledging. Maybe I would be dating someone seriously if I could bring them to family events. I said, "Look, this is not about you personally. We are just trying to keep the numbers manageable." But it was about me personally, and it was about to get much more personal. November brought the final insult. "Alexander, we need to have a family meeting," my mother said when she called me on a Saturday morning, her voice carrying the kind of ominous formality that suggested serious family business was about to be discussed. "Can you come over this afternoon?" When I arrived at my parents' house, I found Marcus, Caroline, and both my parents sitting around the dining room table with serious expressions on their faces. The formal seating arrangement and the absence of any food or drinks suggested this was not a social gathering. "Sit down, honey," my mother said, gesturing to the one empty chair that had clearly been positioned to face the rest of the family. "We need to discuss something important about the wedding." I sat down and waited for someone to explain why I was being subjected to what felt like an intervention or a tribunal. "This is about the wedding," my father began, clearly uncomfortable but determined to deliver whatever message they had agreed upon. "We have been talking as a family, and we think it would be best if you did not attend." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. My own family was uninviting me from my brother's wedding. "I am sorry, what did you just say? We think your presence might be disruptive," Marcus said, not quite able to make eye contact while delivering the blow. "You have been acting strange lately, asking a lot of questions about the planning, making comments about the expense. We are worried you are going to cause problems." "What kind of problems?" "You have been making it clear that you think we are spending too much money," Caroline said, her voice carrying the same tone of concerned authority she probably used with difficult students. "You keep questioning our choices and making suggestions about how to do things differently. Patricia is already stressed about the wedding, and we do not want her to have to worry about family drama." "When have I caused family drama?" "It is not about what you have done," my mother said, clearly trying to sound reasonable and caring. "It is about what you might do. You have never been to a wedding this expensive before. We are worried you are going to be uncomfortable with the formality and make other people uncomfortable." I stared at my family members, trying to process what I was hearing. They were excluding me from the wedding because they thought I could not handle being around expensive things, that my supposed financial limitations would make me behave inappropriately at an upscale event. "So you do not want me to come to Marcus's wedding because you think I am too poor to act properly around rich people?" "It is not about money," Marcus said quickly, clearly recognizing how terrible their reasoning sounded when stated directly. "It is about fit. This is going to be a very formal event with Patricia's family and their friends. We just want everyone to be comfortable." "Including me?" "Including you. We think you would be more comfortable if you did not have to worry about everything." Everything. They meant the expensive venue, the formal attire, the educated guests, the social expectations of people who belonged to country clubs and took European vacations. They thought I would be out of my element at my own brother's wedding. "But we still need your financial contribution," my father added, delivering the final insult with the kind of matter-of-fact tone that suggested he saw nothing contradictory about asking me to fund an event I was not allowed to attend. "The vendors are expecting payment, and we have already committed to the costs based on your offer to help." And there it was. They wanted my money but not my presence. They wanted me to fund their celebration while being excluded from it because they thought I was too unsophisticated to fit in with their idea of respectable society. "You want me to pay $65,000 for a wedding I am not invited to attend? You already committed to helping with the costs, Caroline said, as if my previous offer created a binding obligation that could not be affected by changing circumstances. We have been counting on that money for months. All the contracts are signed. We will take lots of pictures, my mother offered, as if photographic evidence of an event I could not attend would somehow compensate for being excluded. And maybe we can have a small family dinner after the honeymoon where you can celebrate with Marcus and Patricia privately. A consolation dinner. They were offering me a consolation dinner in exchange for funding their wedding and accepting my banishment from the actual celebration. I need some time to think about this, I said, standing up from the table because I could not trust myself to continue the conversation without saying something that would reveal more than I was ready to reveal. The wedding is in 3 weeks, Alexander, Marcus said. We need to finalize everything soon. I understand. I will let you know what I decide. I drove home in a state of shock, not because my family had hurt my feelings, but because they had handed me an opportunity for revenge that was so perfect it seemed almost too good to be true. They wanted to exclude me from a wedding that was taking place at my venue, using my catering company, with guests staying at my hotel, planned by my wedding coordination service, decorated with flowers from my florist. They wanted me to pay for the privilege of being humiliated by people who had no idea that I could destroy their entire celebration with a single phone call. I spent the weekend researching every contract associated with the wedding. The venue rental agreement for Cascade Manor, with its elegant ballroom and panoramic views of Lake Washington. The catering contract with Pinnacle Catering for cocktail hour, 5-course dinner, open bar, and late-night snacks. The hotel reservations at Prestige Seattle for 40 rooms over 3 nights. The entertainment booking for a jazz quartet and DJ. The floral arrangements from Garden of Eden. The photography package, the transportation coordination, the additional staffing for coat check and valet parking. Every single vendor was either owned by my company or contracted through my properties. My family had planned their most important celebration as an unwitting tribute to my business empire while treating me like someone who did not deserve to witness their happiness. Monday morning, I called my executive assistant and asked her to prepare a comprehensive report on all Reed Williams wedding-related bookings across our properties. The numbers were staggering. Beyond the $65,000 they wanted me to contribute, the total value of services being provided by my businesses exceeded $180,000. The hotel block included 40 rooms for 3 nights, with guests paying premium rates for lakefront suites and luxury amenities. The venue rental included not just the reception ballroom but also the bridal suite for Patricia's preparation, the groom's preparation room for Marcus and his groomsmen, and the ceremony site with its gardens and gazebo overlooking the water. The catering package included cocktail hour with premium liquor and signature drinks, a 5-course dinner with wine pairings, an open bar that would run until midnight, and late-night snacks for guests who wanted to continue celebrating. There were additional services for floral arrangements throughout the venue, live music during the ceremony and reception, photography coordination, transportation between the hotel and venue, and specialized staffing for everything from coat check to valet parking. If all of those services were canceled simultaneously, it would be impossible to recreate the wedding elsewhere with only 2 weeks' notice. The guest list included people flying in from across the country who had already booked flights and made vacation plans around the celebration. The bride's dress had been tailored specifically for the chosen venue's aesthetic and would look out of place in a different setting. The honeymoon to Italy was scheduled to begin immediately after the reception, with flights that could not be changed without enormous expense. Canceling the wedding would not just inconvenience my family. It would humiliate them in front of everyone they knew and respected, destroy Patricia's dream celebration, and create a scandal that would be talked about for years, which was exactly what they deserved. Tuesday morning brought the phone call from Elena Martinez that would change everything. "Hello, this is Elena Martinez from Prestige Wedding Planning. I am calling regarding the Reed Williams wedding on the 23rd. Yes, what can I help you with? Well, this is rather awkward, but I have been instructed to inform you that your invitation has been rescinded. However, the family is hoping you will still honor your commitment to cover the deposit and catering costs as previously discussed. The moment had arrived. My family had officially asked me to pay for a wedding I was not allowed to attend, and they had done it through a wedding planner who worked for a company I had purchased 6 months earlier. Elena, I need you to listen very carefully to what I am about to tell you. Of course, sir. Cancel the entire wedding. I am sorry, what did you say? Cancel everything. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the music, the hotel blocks. All of it. Sir, I think there has been a misunderstanding. You are not the groom. You cannot just cancel someone else's wedding. Actually, Elena, I can, because I own the venue where the reception is being held. I own the catering company providing the food. I own the hotel chain where all the out-of-town guests have reservations. And as of this morning, I own the company that employs you. The silence that followed was absolute and lasted long enough for me to wonder if the call had been disconnected. Mr. Reed, are you saying? I am saying that my family just uninvited me from a wedding that is taking place entirely on my properties, using my services, planned by my employees. And they want me to pay for the privilege of being excluded. Oh my God! You have 24 hours to notify all vendors, guests, and venues that the Reed Williams wedding has been canceled. Anyone who has already made travel arrangements will receive full compensation for their expenses, including flights, hotels, and any other costs they incurred. But there will be no wedding on the 23rd. Sir, this will be devastating for the couple and their families. Elena, let me ask you something. If someone uninvited you from your own birthday party but still expected you to pay for it, how would you react? I would be furious. Then you understand my position perfectly. After I hung up the phone, I sat in my office and watched the Seattle skyline while contemplating what I had just set in motion. By this time tomorrow, my family would discover that their dream wedding had become a nightmare, and they would have no idea that their own treatment of me was the direct cause of their humiliation. My phone started ringing 20 minutes later. Alexander, what the hell did you just do? Marcus's voice was shaking with rage and panic, the careful control he usually maintained completely gone. I decided not to attend your wedding. The venue just canceled our contract. They said all of our bookings have been terminated. The caterer canceled. The hotel canceled. The wedding is off. That is unfortunate. Unfortunate? Alexander, you destroyed my wedding. How could you do this to me? I did not do anything to you, Marcus. I simply chose not to fund an event that I was not invited to attend. What are you talking about? You do not have anything to do with the venue. Actually, I do. I own the venue. I also own the catering company, the hotel, and the wedding planning service. Your entire celebration was being provided by my businesses. The silence that followed lasted almost 30 seconds. That is impossible, Marcus said finally. You do not own anything. You are a restaurant manager. I was a restaurant owner 15 years ago. Since then, I have built a hospitality empire worth over $200 million. Every vendor you hired for your wedding works for me. You are lying. Marcus, how do you think I was able to afford to contribute $65,000 to your wedding? Did you really believe that a restaurant manager had that kind of cash sitting around? Another long pause while he processed the implications. Why did not you tell us? Because you never asked. You all assumed I was struggling financially, and I saw no reason to correct your assumptions. Especially since those assumptions led you to treat me like someone whose feelings did not matter. Alexander, we can fix this. We can talk about the invitation. Maybe we made a mistake. You made several mistakes. You uninvited me from my brother's wedding because you thought I was too poor to act appropriately at an expensive event. You asked me to fund a celebration while excluding me from it. And you did all of this using businesses that I own. I did not know. You did not know because you never bothered to learn anything about my actual life. You preferred to believe that I was a failure because it made you feel better about your own modest success. My phone rang 6 more times in the next hour. Caroline called to cry and beg me to reconsider. My mother called to accuse me of ruining the family and destroying Marcus's happiness out of spite. My father called to demand that I explain myself and fix whatever I had broken. Patricia called to scream at me for destroying the most important day of her life. I did not answer any of the calls. Instead, I instructed my assistant to prepare a press release announcing that Prestige Hospitality Group would be donating $100,000 to local charities in honor of the Reed Williams wedding that was supposed to take place on Saturday. The donation would fund scholarships for hospitality industry workers who wanted to start their own businesses, continuing education programs for restaurant managers, and small business development loans for entrepreneurs from working-class backgrounds. The press release also mentioned that the donation was being made by company founder Alexander Reed, whose personal net worth exceeded $200 million and whose business empire employed over 800 people across 3 states. By Thursday, the story had been picked up by local news outlets as a human interest piece about successful entrepreneurs giving back to their communities. By Friday, it was trending on social media as an example of family karma and the dangers of judging people by appearances. My family's humiliation was complete and very public. Saturday morning, I woke up in my penthouse apartment and made coffee while looking out at the Seattle waterfront. In another timeline, I would have been getting ready to attend my brother's wedding, probably feeling uncomfortable and out of place among Patricia's wealthy relatives and my family's pretentious friends. Instead, I was planning a quiet weekend of reading and relaxation. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Alex, this is Patricia. Please call me. We need to talk." I deleted the message without responding. An hour later, another message arrived from Marcus. "I know you hate us right now, but we are still family. Can we please try to work this out?" I deleted that message too. By noon, I had received 37 text messages and 42 voicemails from various family members, wedding guests, and mutual acquaintances who wanted to understand what had happened. I ignored all of them. The only communication I responded to was an email from Elena Martinez. "Mr. Reed, I wanted to thank you for the way you handled the cancellation. You were professional and generous with the guest compensation, and I learned something important about not making assumptions about people. If you ever need wedding planning services in the future, I would be honored to work with you." I replied, "Elena, you handled a difficult situation with grace and professionalism. I have already recommended you for a promotion within the company. Thank you for treating me with respect even when you thought I was powerless." Sunday evening brought one final phone call from my father. "Alexander, I am calling to ask you to reconsider." "Reconsider what, Dad?" "Everything. The wedding cancellation, the way you are handling this situation, the damage you are doing to our family." "The damage I am doing?" "Son, I understand you are angry about the invitation situation. Maybe we made some mistakes in how we handled that. But canceling the wedding was extreme. You hurt a lot of innocent people. Did I? Or did I simply stop subsidizing people who had made it clear that they did not want me around? That is not fair. We love you, Alexander. We have always loved you. You love the idea of me, Dad. You love having a son who can contribute $65,000 to family celebrations. But you do not love the actual person I am, because you have never bothered to find out who that person is. We want to find out. We want to rebuild our relationship with you. Based on what? My money? My success? The fact that I turned out to be more successful than you ever imagined. Based on the fact that you are our son. I have been your son for 35 years, Dad. It should not have taken a canceled wedding for you to realize that. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, but the fundamental dynamic did not change. My father wanted to repair our relationship, but he still could not acknowledge that my family's treatment of me had been fundamentally wrong. He saw the wedding cancellation as an overreaction to a minor social misunderstanding rather than as the natural consequence of years of dismissive behavior. We ended the call without resolution, and I have not spoken to any family member since. 3 months have passed since the wedding that never happened. My business continues to thrive, my personal wealth continues to grow, and my life continues to be fulfilling in ways that have nothing to do with family approval or recognition. I have received dozens of interview requests from journalists who want to write about the wedding revenge story. I have declined all of them. The point was never to become famous or to publicly humiliate my family. The point was to establish that I would not accept being treated as inferior by people who had no idea what they were talking about. Marcus and Patricia eventually had a small wedding ceremony 6 months later. From what I heard through mutual acquaintances, it was a lovely event that took place in a public park with catering from a local deli and decorations they made themselves. They seem happy together, and I genuinely hope their marriage is successful. Caroline and I maintain minimal contact through social media. She sends me birthday wishes and holiday greetings, and I respond politely but without enthusiasm. There is no hostility between us, but there is also no real relationship. My parents have made several attempts to rebuild our connection, including a formal apology letter and an invitation to Thanksgiving dinner. I have politely declined their overtures while keeping the door open for future reconciliation if they demonstrate genuine understanding of what went wrong. The most surprising development has been the number of people who have reached out to share similar stories of family members who treated them poorly until they achieved unexpected success. Apparently, being underestimated by your own family is more common than I realized. I have also discovered that building wealth in secret has some unexpected advantages. Because my success was not public knowledge, I was able to observe people's true character without the distorting effects of known wealth. I learned who could be trusted with vulnerability and who would exploit perceived weakness. The lesson I learned from this experience is not about money or revenge or family dynamics. It is about the importance of respecting people regardless of their apparent circumstances, and the danger of making assumptions about others based on limited information. My family assumed I was struggling financially because I dressed modestly and drove an older car. They never asked about my businesses or my goals or my achievements because they had already decided that I was not worth taking seriously. Their assumptions cost them not just a wedding, but a relationship with someone who might have been genuinely helpful and supportive if they had treated him with basic respect. The irony is that they were right about one thing. I did not fit in at their expensive wedding. Not because I could not afford to be there, but because I had outgrown the need for their approval. And sometimes, outgrowing your family's expectations is the most liberating form of success you can achieve. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Before you go, I have left 2 more stories here on your screen. Both from men who discovered that family is not always who you are born to, it is who stands by you when the truth comes out. Click on whichever one calls to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it is like to be the outsider looking in, that notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember your story matters, even if they tried to erase it.